Morning all. Alright, so we're rounding out the team history videos today with a look at the San Jose Sharks, a franchise that has not had its first Stanley Cup yet. Lots of opportunities at that Stanley Cup when you look at playoff appearances, but just have not got over that hump yet. And of course, they're in a rebuild, but they're not in a rebuild. It's kind of Schrodinger's rebuild in San Jose. So Patrick Marleau is the all-time leading scorer. 1,067 games played, 522 goals, 589 assists, 1,111 points. And he is also scheduled to become the first retired number for the San Jose Sharks. The number 12 will be retired by the team on February 25th of next year. Joe Thornton's number 2 on the list. You have to think they'll be retiring his number as soon as he is retired from the game. 1,104 games played, 251 goals, 804 assists, 1,055 points. And if you watch the Sharks during the era that they were the dominant players and the leaders, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not they could lead a team to a Stanley Cup. And it didn't happen, sadly. So if you believe that it's on the team, if you believe it's on the players, and by on the players I mean on Thornton and Marleau, not much I can say to change your mind on that at this point. Joe Pavelski, 963 games played for the Sharks, 355 goals, 406 assists, 761 points. Logan Couture has played 845 games. He has 296 goals, 337 assists, 633 points. So he's not going to pass Pavelski this year, but 2 years he should be able to pass Pavelski on that list. Brent Burns, barring injury, of course. Brent Burns, 798 games played with the Sharks. He, of course, was traded this offseason. 172 goals, 422 assists, 594 points. Owen Nolan, 568 games played, 206 goals, 245 assists, 451 points. Tomas Hertl, 585 games played by Hertl, 181 goals, 206 assists, 387 points. So he'll pass Owen Nolan, but Hertl likely doesn't do it this season, I wouldn't think, but we'll see. It's possible, I guess. And then Jeff Friesen's number 8 on the board, 512 games played, 149 goals, 201 assists, 350 points. Marc-Edouard Vlasic is on the list because he's played 1,161 games, so a lot of games played. 76 goals, 370 assists, 346 points. So with 5 points, he would bump Jeff Friesen down to 9th on the list. Jonathan Cheechoo is still in the top 10, 440 games played, 165 goals, 126 assists, 291 points. When we get to the all-time wins leaders, well, Evgeny Nabokov has that with 293. Martin Jones, who has now left the team, 170 wins for him, of course, before he went to Philly last year. Now he's in Seattle this year. Antti Niemi, 163 wins for him. Vesa Toskala with 65, and Arturs Urbe with 57. As I mentioned, the retired numbers. At this point, there aren't any. Patrick Marleau is set to become the first. Now, when we look at the playoffs, this team makes the playoffs a lot until 2019. And again, it's about not being able to get over the hump and win that championship. In 2000, they lose in the second round. That was in 5 games against Dallas. 2001, they lost in the first round. That was in 6 games against St. Louis. 2002, they lose in the second round against Colorado. They pushed the Avalanche 2-7. 2004, they lose in the conference final after a year out of the playoffs against Calgary in 6. 2006, they lost in the second round. That was in 6 games against Edmonton. 2007, they lost in the second round again, this time against Detroit, also in 6. 2008, they lost in the second round against Dallas. That was also in 6 games. 2009, they lose in round 1 against Anaheim. That was in 6. So losing in 6 is kind of what they did for an era there. 2010, the first round loss against Anaheim, followed by 2011. They get all the way to the conference final. Or 2010, they lose in the conference final against Chicago. That was in 4 straight. And then 2011, they reached the conference final again before losing in 5 against the Vancouver Canucks. 2011, they lose in the first round against St. Louis. That was in 5. 2013, they lose in the second round against LA. That was in 7. 2014, they lose in the first round. That was in 7 against LA. The reverse sweep, of course, being a problem for San Jose against the LA Kings, where they had a 3-0 series lead and then lost 4 in a row. So then in 2016, after a year out of the playoffs, they lose in the final against the Pittsburgh Penguins. That was in 6. That's the farthest the San Jose Sharks franchise has gone. 2017, they lose in the first round. That was in 6 games against Edmonton. 2018, they lost in the second round against Vegas. That took 6 games. And most recently in 2019, they lose in the conference finals against St. Louis. That was also in 6. So again, Stanley Cups, there aren't any. They've had the one Stanley Cup final appearance. Their arena since 1994, and it's gone through different changes of names, but the SAP Center is what it's called now. And so that's been their home for a long time. And I remember when they got to San Jose, and they didn't really have a barn to play in. That was the odd part, was that they gave them the expansion team. They sent them there. They didn't really have anywhere to play to start off, but they made it work. They've had 11 coaches in their history. Their 11th coach being hired over the summer, being David Quinn. Their first coach was George Kingston, who had a record of 28, 129, and 7 behind the bench. Keep in mind, San Jose that first year was considered to be better than expected. It was the second year that they really fell apart. The first goal in team history was scored by Craig Cox at 4:09 of the third period in a 4-3 loss against the Canucks. So a wild game that the Canucks end up winning. I remember that. I remember the Canucks making things interesting against San Jose more than they needed to. Their most recent goal was scored by Nick Bonino at 10 minutes and 40 seconds of the third in a 5-4 overtime loss against the Oilers. They were actually shut out by the Kraken in the season finale, so that was game 81, where they lost 5-4 in overtime. So, tough season for San Jose all around. Now, when we get into season records, Jonathan Cheechoo, 56 goals in 2005-2006. I think that record's pretty safe, unless Meyer has a monster season. Assists, Joe Thornton with 92 in 06-07. Also the year he set the team record in points with 114. Penalty minutes in a season, Link Gates with 326 in 91-92. But all time, it's Jeff Odgers with 1,001. And I mean, Link Gates, if he'd been a better hockey player all around, he probably would have at least threatened the 2,000 penalty minute mark in his career. He knew what his job was. Wins, Evgeny Nabokov with 46 in 2007-2008. And then we get into draft picks, the best draft picks, and of course the ones that haven't played in the 100 games that they've drafted in the first round. Best draft picks for me, how do you go wrong with, at 205 in 2003, Joe Pavelski. Number 145 in 1998 was Michael Samuelson, who went on to have a nice long career. Not in San Jose, though. Number 106 in 2001 was Christian Ehrhoff. Number 173 in 2007 was Nick Bonino. Number 201 in 2007 was Justin Braun. So 2007, they had a couple of hits late in the draft. Number 219 in 1994 was Evgeny Nabokov. Nice draft pick there. Number 116 in 1995 was Mika Kiprasov, who, of course, doesn't end up in the wins leaders category, but he ends up doing that for Calgary. Number 94 pick in 2004 was Thomas Greiss. So they're good at picking goaltenders. And San Jose, over their history, have had times where, and I'm looking back to the Toskala, Kiprasov, Nabokov era, they had a pretty good pipeline going at that point. And now first-round picks that have played less than 100 games, not as many, but of course this team comes into existence in the 90s, so they skipped over. The 60s and 70s seems to be where teams were more likely to get misses in the draft, and it's totally understandable, considering how much more important the draft appears to us now than it did to us then. So 1995 drafted 12th overall was Teemu Riihijärvi. No games, so obviously no points because he didn't play in the NHL. Number 27 in 2002 was Mike Morris. No games for Mike Morris. Number 22 in 2004 was Lucas Kaspar, who ends up playing 16 games in the NHL. I know it's Casper, but it's got the AR at the end. So anyway. Number 16 in 2006 was Ty Wishart, who ends up playing 26 games in the NHL. Number 28 in 2007 was Nicholas Petrecki, who played 1 game in the NHL. Well, on the NHL games I was playing, he played a lot more than that, but that's the NHL games I was playing. I don't know, he was one of those defensemen I would pick up and he'd become pretty good in the game. But in real life, he only played 1 game in the NHL, so I kept an eye on him and he just didn't quite make it. He was right on that edge and just couldn't quite crack the lineup. But that's how that works. All right, so there you go. San Jose Sharks done. All 31 teams done. The next time out when I do this, I'll have a history of Seattle to talk about. But at this point, just the 1 year. It'd make for kind of a boring board. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. And hey, if you haven't already hit like and subscribe, now's a perfect time to do so. Thank you guys so much for everything. I will talk to you again soon.